Today, we're going to trace the shock waves of a single military operation as they ripple across the entire globe. We're looking at Operation Sindoor, and, this one event really tells us so much about modern conflict, technology, and that delicate dance of global diplomacy. So let's just dive right in with a big question. How is it even possible that an action lasting less time than your average sitcom can trigger these immediate, complex responses from Washington, Beijing, and Moscow? Well, that's the puzzle we're going to piece together today. Okay, so let's start with the operation itself. This was not some random act of aggression. The source materials are super clear on this. This was framed as a highly calculated, a calibrated military response to a very specific event.
And the trigger? It was a devastating terror attack in Pahalgam back on April 22nd, which tragically claimed the lives of 26 civilians. And that number, 26, is so crucial because it became the justification for everything that was about to happen.
So what was the response? Well, it wasn't an all-out war. Instead, it was a precise operation that targeted just 9 terrorist-linked sites across Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. The focus was crystal clear. Hit the infrastructure, not the surrounding areas. And this is where the speed becomes, well, truly remarkable. The entire operation, from start to finish, across all 9 of those targets, took just 23 minutes. I mean, think about that for a second. 23 minutes to pull off a complex, multi-target strike deep inside hostile territory. And the outcome of that incredibly short window? Well, according to Indian sources, over 100 terrorists were neutralized. And that figure reportedly included several high-value leaders, a pretty significant tactical result, delivered with incredible speed. So you're probably asking, how was this even possible? Well, the answer really lies in technology, not brute force. This was a showcase of advanced weaponry. We're talking everything from scalp cruise missiles to precision-guided hammer bombs, all coordinated between the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy to enable these surgical strikes, and, really importantly, to minimize collateral damage.
All right, so the military action is over in 23 minutes, but the diplomatic fallout, that was just getting started. So let's turn to the first major global player to enter the scene, the United States. So from the American side, we have then-President Donald Trump, who claimed he played a really pivotal role in diffusing what he called nuclear-level tensions. He said he warned both leaders of significant trade consequences if things escalated, pretty much positioning himself as the key figure who brokered the peace. But, and this is a really, really important but, Indian authorities tell a completely different story. They publicly denied that any foreign intervention was involved in getting to that ceasefire. So this creates this fascinating diplomatic ambiguity, Was the U.S. deeply involved, or wasn't it? The sources show it's still very much a point of debate. So while the whole direct intervention thing is debated, here's what we know for sure happened. There were high-level briefings between the national security advisors, that's Ajit Doval for India and Marco Rubio for the U.S., and very publicly, American Vice President J.D. Vance praised what he called India's restraint and responsibility. So what's undeniable is that whether it was behind the scenes or out in the open, the U.S. was actively engaged. But the U.S. wasn't the only power watching this all unfold. The ripples from this operation spread much, much wider, pulling in 2 other giants, China and Russia. And their reactions, well, they paint a much bigger picture of global power dynamics. And right here, you can see 3 very different geopolitical strategies at play. You had the U.S. aiming for regional stability through diplomacy. You had Russia maintaining neutrality and pushing for a bilateral solution. And then there's China. Publicly, they were calling for peace, but their actions pointed to some deep support for their ally, Pakistan. Now, to really understand China's role here, we kind of need this term, strategic enabler. This is basically a nation that provides the tools, the weapons, the intelligence, the diplomatic cover that allow another nation to go after its own goals. And according to the sources, this is precisely the role China played, providing Pakistan with everything from drones and missiles to real-time battlefield intelligence and satellite coverage. Russia, on the other hand, fell back on its more traditional diplomatic stance. It immediately condemned the terrorism, of course, but then it pointed to these historical pacts, like the Simla Agreement and the Lahore Declaration. It was essentially saying, hey, this is an issue for India and Pakistan to resolve themselves, based on their own past agreements, kind of pushing back against any outside intervention. So,
After the strikes, the diplomacy, and all the global posturing, what did we actually learn? What does this single 23-minute event tell us about the new geopolitical map we're all trying to navigate?
So let's break down the big takeaways here. First, we saw India's capacity for a surgical military response. But just as importantly, we saw that diplomatic channels actually worked to stop a wider war. The crisis also threw existing alliances into sharp relief, showing us who stood with whom. And maybe most hopefully, the fact that old trust-building pacts continued proved there was a shared desire on all sides to avoid a total catastrophe.
And this brings us to our final thought. We've seen a rapid high-tech strike followed by this intense multipolar diplomacy that contained the fallout. In a world that's just bristling with tension, could this combination of limited, precise military action and complex back-channel communication be the new, albeit pretty dangerous, face of modern conflict resolution? It's definitely something to think about.